My name is Carolyn Blake, and for the last 19 years, my primary profession has been mom. Alongside that, I've been a housekeeper, a waitress, and a weekend receptionist, a patchwork of jobs sewn together with exhaustion and fierce, unwavering love for my son Nathan. My major success raising him to be a bright, ambitious young man on the cusp of his dreams. But that day, the day of his high school graduation, I had no idea that one proud moment would unravel into the most painful, yet ultimately liberating revelation of my life. They thought I'd never uncover the truth about the whispers in hallways, the subtle shifts in my son's eyes, the gilded cage being built around his aspirations. The air in that reception hall was thick with the scent of lilies and achievement, but all I could smell was the acrid tang of betrayal when my son, my Nathan, gestured to a wealthy, elegant woman beside him and said, "Everyone, this is Miranda, the woman who made everything possible for me, my mother." Then a casual flick of his hand towards me, standing there in my carefully chosen, budget-friendly dress. "And this is Carolyn, a family friend, so a family friend. 19 years of sacrifice of lullabies and fevers of patched-up jeans, and dreams deferred all reduced to family friend. Multiple truths were about to be revealed, layers of deceit I couldn't have imagined. At that moment, I felt like my entire identity crumbled, the carefully constructed dam of my composure threatening to burst. If you've ever experienced the sting of being unappreciated, of your deepest sacrifices being casually dismissed by someone you poured your entire soul into, comment and subscribe. You are not alone. Trust me, if you're a parent, a caregiver, or anyone who has ever loved someone so much it hurts, this story will change how you see family, sacrifice, and the fight for recognition forever. My life as I truly understood it began the day I found out I was pregnant with Nathan. I was 18, barely an adult myself, with a heart full of naive dreams and a boyfriend, Derek Blake, who whispered promises as easily as he breathed. Those promises turned to smoke the moment the 2 pink lines appeared on that test. Derek, who had sworn eternal love, vanished, leaving me with a growing belly and a future that had suddenly narrowed to a single, terrifying point: survival for me and for my child. I remember my own mother, a stoic woman who'd weathered her own share of storms, looking at me not with condemnation, but with a weary resignation. "A woman's lot is sacrifice, Carolyn," she'd said, her hands gnarled from years of factory work resting on her apron. "You just learn to carry it." Her words weren't meant to be cruel, but they settled in my bones like a premonition. My father, a man of few words and even fewer displays of affection, simply grunted and retreated behind his newspaper. There was no room for girlish dreams in our cramped, perpetually dim living room. Life was about enduring, not aspiring. So I endured. Nathan became my world, my reason for every pre-dawn alarm, every aching muscle, every swallowed tear. I found a tiny 2-room apartment above a noisy laundromat. The rent was cheap, but the smell of bleach and damp fabric was a constant reminder of our precarious existence. My first job was cleaning houses for people who lived in worlds I could only glimpse through their polished windows. I'd scrub their marble floors, dust their gleaming heirlooms, and imagine Nathan, years from then, living in a place where comfort wasn't a luxury, but a given. Then came the waitressing job at a local diner, the late night smelling of grease and stale coffee, the forced smiles for customers who rarely saw the exhaustion behind my eyes. On weekends, I'd answer phones at a small motel, the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the chaos of my weekdays. Sleep became a snatched commodity, a few precious hours between shifts, often interrupted by Nathan's cries as a baby, or later his need for a comforting presence after a nightmare. Nathan, even as a little boy, was preternaturally bright. His eyes, a clear, intelligent blue, seemed to absorb everything. He learned to read early, devouring books from the local library like they were candy. He was a quiet child, often content to sit with his drawings while I folded laundry or prepped for my next shift. One of those drawings, sketched on a piece of crinkled notebook paper when he was about 7, became my most treasured possession. It was a child's rendering of a grand, sprawling house with a smiling stick figure, him, handing a key to another stick figure with slightly longer hair, me. Scrawled beneath it in wobbly letters was, "When I become a doctor, I will buy my mom a big house." I laminated that drawing with clear packing tape and kept it in my wallet, a tangible reminder of the future I was fighting for him. It was proof that he saw me, that he understood in his childish way the weight I carried. My sacrifices were countless, small and large, accumulating like pebbles in a heavy sack. I remember Nathan needing special tutoring for an advanced math class in middle school. The cost was astronomical to me, equivalent to 2 weeks' pay from the diner. That month, I ate plain rice and beans for dinner every night, telling Nathan I was on a health kick. He'd look at me with concern, but I'd just smile and ruffle his hair. Another time, he was invited to a prestigious summer science camp. The fee was a mountain. I took on extra cleaning clients, working until my hands were raw and my back screamed in protest, scrubbing floors on my hands and knees, praying my body would hold out. He went to that camp, and his eyes shone with excitement when he told me about all he'd learned. That shine was my reward. I'd long given up any thought of further education for myself. There were fleeting moments, usually late at night, when exhaustion warred with a restless mind, that I'd dream of going back to school, maybe studying nursing or social work. But those dreams were luxuries I couldn't afford. Nathan's future was the only one that mattered. My clothes were often from thrift stores, my shoes worn until the soles flapped. Once I remember him noticing my tattered sneakers just before his 8th grade field trip. "Mom, your shoes are broken," he'd said, a little wrinkle of worry on his brow. I'd laughed it off. "Oh, these old things. They're my lucky, comfortable shoe." The next day I spent my meager savings on a new pair of sneakers for him. His were getting too small. As Nathan grew, so did his awareness of our poverty. His friends at school came from different backgrounds. Some had fathers, some lived in houses with gardens, some went on vacations. We had none of that. I saw the occasional flicker of shame in his eyes when he'd reluctantly invite a friend over to our cramped apartment, the scent of the laundromat clinging to everything. I tried to make it a home filled with love and warmth, but I knew it wasn't the same. I just prayed my love would be enough to armor him against the world's casual cruelties. Miranda Hayes entered our lives when Nathan was a junior in high school. She was a prominent philanthropist in our city, known for her charity that supported underprivileged youth with academic potential. Nathan, with his stellar grades and clear ambition to become a doctor, had applied for one of her scholarships. I remember the day he got the news. He burst through the door, his face alight. "Mom, I got it. Mrs. Hayes wants to meet me. She's going to help with college applications, maybe even more." Miranda was everything I wasn't. She was around 45, impeccably dressed with an air of effortless grace and wealth. Her home, where Nathan sometimes went for meetings or mentorship sessions, was a palace compared to our humble dwelling. She was kind, encouraging, and seemed genuinely invested in Nathan's future. I was immensely grateful. Here was someone who could open doors for Nathan that I never could. Someone who could provide resources I could only dream of. I pushed down the tiny, irrational flicker of something else. Not jealousy, not exactly. Maybe a feeling of being on the sidelines of my own son's ascent. But I told myself it was for the best. This was what I'd always wanted for him, a path out, a chance at the life he deserved. Richard, her husband, was a lawyer, a quiet, observant man who always treated Nathan with polite encouragement. They seemed like a golden couple, bestowing opportunities like benevolent gods. I never imagined that this golden path was paved with something far more insidious, that Derek, the ghost of Nathan's past, was silently pulling strings, grooming my son for a role in a play I hadn't even known was being staged. All I saw was Nathan's star rising, and I was content to be the earth-bound mother cheering from below, unaware that he was slowly, surely being taught to be ashamed of the ground he came from. The years leading up to Nathan's graduation became a blur of escalating hope and subtle creeping disquiet. Each academic award Nathan won, each glowing report card, was a personal victory for me. I'd stick them on our aging refrigerator with faded magnets, a colorful testament to his brilliance and my enduring support. When he was named valedictorian, I wept openly, a messy, joyful flood of tears that came from a place deep within a reservoir of 19 years of relentless effort. "You did it, baby," I whispered, hugging him tight. "You're going to be a doctor." He'd smiled a little less effusively than he used to, a touch more reserved. "Thanks, Mom. It was a lot of work." The pattern of my life remained unchanged: work, worry, sacrifice. The diner, the houses, the motel reception, the rotation was relentless. But now there was a new element, Miranda. Her influence grew steadily. Nathan started spending more time at her home, attending functions with her, meeting people she knew. He'd come back talking about networking opportunities and making connections, phrases that sounded alien coming from my son, who once dreamed only of healing people. I noticed the small changes first. He began to subtly critique our apartment. "It's so small, Mom, and it always smells like next door's cooking." He'd sigh when my old car, affectionately nicknamed the Clunker, would rattle a bit too loudly. He started asking for money for clothes that weren't from the thrift store, wanting to look presentable for events with Miranda. I stretched my already thin budget to its breaking point, taking on extra shifts, telling myself it was an investment in his future. One Saturday, I'd managed to save a little extra. "Nathan," I said, my voice bright with excitement, "I was thinking maybe we could go to that Italian place you like for dinner tonight. My treat." He was on his phone, a sleek new model Miranda had loaned him. He barely looked up. "Oh, thanks, Mom, but I can't. Miranda's invited me to a charity gala tonight. It's important for, meeting people." "Oh," I said, the brightness dimming. "Okay, honey, another time then." "Yeah, sure," he mumbled, already absorbed in a text message. The pattern of him choosing Miranda's world over our small traditions was beginning to etch itself into my heart. My internal monologue became a constant battle. "He's growing up, Carolyn. He needs these experiences. Miranda is offering him a world you can't. Don't be selfish." But another smaller voice whispered, "Is he forgetting where he came from? Is he forgetting you?" I'd pushed that voice down, labeling it as insecurity, as a mother's irrational fear of her child leaving the nest. Then came the reemergence of Derek. It happened when Nathan was about 16. I remember Nathan coming home one afternoon looking pale and agitated. "Mom," he'd said, his voice trembling slightly, I met someone today. He said he's my father." My blood ran cold. Derek. After all these years. "What did he say, Nathan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "He said he's been looking for me, that he made mistakes, but he wants to be a part of my life now. He seemed really sorry, Mom." I didn't know then the extent of the poison Derek was about to drip into my son's ear. I tried to warn Nathan to tell him about Derek's unreliability, his selfishness. But Derek was charming, manipulative. He played the part of the repentant father perfectly. He started meeting Nathan secretly, feeding him stories, painting himself as a victim of circumstance, and perhaps subtly painting me as the one who had kept them apart, or at least the one who was holding Nathan back with her limited worldview. I remember one particularly painful conversation. Nathan had just received a significant academic award, and I'd planned a small celebration. His favorite home-cooked meal, a new secondhand science encyclopedia I'd found. He'd arrived late, full of apologies and explanations about a very important meeting Derek had arranged for him with someone who could help with college strategies. "Mom, Derek says I need to think bigger," Nathan had said, an edge of impatience in his voice I hadn't heard before. "He says you mean well, but you don't really understand the kind of world I'm aiming for. He's looking into ways to fund my future, a proper college fund, not just scraping by." Scraping by. The words were like a slap. "Nathan, everything I've done, every penny I've saved has been for your future." "I know, Mom, I know," he'd said, already defensive. "But Derek has connections. He knows people. Miranda knows people. It's just different." The encyclopedia lay forgotten on the table. My heart ached with a familiar, dull pain. It wasn't just that my efforts were being dismissed. It was the implication that my love, my very way of life, was somehow inadequate, an embarrassment. This was the most recent major disappointment, a heavy shadow that stretched all the way to graduation day. Miranda, in contrast, was always presented as the epitome of success and generosity. She'd take Nathan shopping for appropriate attire for functions. She'd talk to him about Ivy League schools, about medical specializations I'd never even heard of. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller and less significant in his life, even as he was on the verge of the very success I'd dedicated my life to helping him achieve. Richard. Her husband remained a somewhat enigmatic figure. He was always polite, always supportive of Nathan in a reserved way, but I could never quite read him. He'd observe Nathan and Miranda, a slight frown, sometimes creasing his brow, but he never said much to me beyond pleasantries. The pattern was clear. Nathan was being pulled into an orbit of wealth and influence, and I, his mother, the one who had launched him, was becoming a distant, fading star. The pride I felt was increasingly tinged with a profound sadness, a sense of being overlooked, of my sacrifices, being repackaged as scraping by. Little did I know this was just the prelude. The real storm was about to break, and it would tear through everything I thought I knew about my son, his father, and the gilded world that had so captivated him. The morning of Nathan's high school graduation dawned bright and painfully clear. I'd laid out my best dress the night before, a simple navy blue sheath I'd found on sale after weeks of searching. It wasn't designer, but it was neat, respectable. I wanted to look proud like the mother of a valedictorian. My heart thrummed with a nervous excitement that was almost unbearable. This was it, the culmination of 19 years. The ceremony was a blur of speeches and applause. When Nathan walked onto the stage, tall and handsome in his cap and gown, a wave of pure, unadulterated pride washed over me, momentarily eclipsing all the creeping anxieties of the past few years. His valedictorian speech was eloquent, full of hope for the future and gratitude for the opportunities he'd been given. He thanked his teachers, his mentors. He even gave a nod to those who have supported me along the way. I scanned his face, searching for a glance, a specific mention. It didn't come. A small, cold knot formed in my stomach, but I pushed it down. He's nervous. He'll thank me properly later. The reception was held in the school's grand assembly hall, transformed with white linen floral arrangements and a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Miranda was there, of course, looking regal in a silk dress, Richard by her side. They were surrounded by a small crowd of admirers, Nathan beaming amongst them. I hovered on the periphery, a cup of lukewarm punch in my hand, feeling a familiar sense of invisibility. Then came the moment. Nathan, flushed with success, began introducing Miranda to a group of his friends and their parents. His voice, amplified slightly by the hall's acoustics, carried clearly. "Everyone," he announced, his arms sweeping towards Miranda with a flourish. "This is Miranda Hayes, the woman who made everything possible for me, my mother." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. My mother. The air rushed out of my lungs. My vision swam. Surely I'd misheard. But then one of his friends, James, a polite boy who'd been to our apartment a few times, caught my eye and gestured towards me. Nathan followed his gaze, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Oh," he said, his tone suddenly casual, almost dismissive. "And this is Carolyn Blake, a family friend." A family friend. The cold knot in my stomach tightened into a fist of ice. The room seemed to tilt. The polite chatter, the clinking of glasses, the soft music, it all faded into a roaring in my ears. A family friend. After all the nights I'd stayed up with him when he was sick, all the school lunches I'd packed with loving care, all the dreams I'd sacrificed on the altar of his future. This was my reward, to be publicly disowned, demoted from mother to acquaintance. My first instinct was to flee, to run from the suffocating humiliation, but then a different feeling surged through me. A white-hot anger, potent and unfamiliar. The drawing, the one I'd carried in my wallet for over a decade, burned like an ember against my chest. When I become a doctor, I will buy my mom a big house. Was this the same boy? I started moving towards them, a strange calm settling over the rage. The sea of faces seemed to part before me. Nathan saw me approaching, his eyes widening slightly. Miranda turned, a polite, curious smile on her face. Richard watched me, his expression unreadable. "Nathan," I said. my voice surprisingly steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "What did you just call me?" He flinched. "Mom, please," he muttered, his cheeks flushing a deep red. "Not here. This isn't the time or place." "Isn't it?" I pressed my voice, rising slightly. "After 19 years of raising you, of working 3 jobs to put food on our table, to buy your books, to make sure you had everything you needed to get to this very stage, I'm just a family friend." The chatter around us died down. People were starting to stare. Miranda's smile had vanished, replaced by a look of confusion and dawning discomfort. "Carolyn, perhaps we can discuss this privately," she interjected, her tone smooth and placating. "No, Miranda," I said, turning to her. "I think it's important for everyone to understand. This boy," I gestured to Nathan, who looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him, "is my son. I am his mother, the one who changed his diapers, who taught him to tie his shoes, who sat up with him through fevers and nightmares, the one who believed in him when no one else did." I pulled out my worn wallet, my fingers trembling, as I fumbled for the laminated drawing. I held it up. "Do you remember this, Nathan? When I become a doctor, I will buy my mom a big house. You drew this for me when you were 7. I've kept it all these years. Did family friends inspire that?" Nathan's face crumpled. Tears welled in his eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry," he stammered. "It's just, you don't understand. Their world, Miranda's world, it's so different. I just wanted to fit in. I was ashamed." "Ashamed?" The word was a fresh stab to my heart. "Ashamed of me, ashamed of our life, ashamed of the sacrifices that got you here." The dam of my composure was cracking, an agonizing pressure building behind my eyes. I thought of Derek, of his insidious whispers. He had always been skilled at exploiting weakness, at twisting love into shame. He had done it to me years ago, convincing me I was worthless after he left. Now I saw his fingerprints all over Nathan's cruel words. Derek's motivation had always been self-preservation and self-aggrandizement, and he clearly saw Nathan as a new vehicle for his ambitions. Richard, Miranda's husband, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. He had a stern, assessing look on his face. "Nathan," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "what exactly is going on here? There seems to be more to this than just fitting in." It was then that Nathan, under the weight of my anguish and Richard's pointed gaze, began to crumble further. It's not just that." He choked out, tears streaming down his face. "It's Dad. It was Dad's idea." My breath hitched. "Derek, I knew it. He reappeared a few years ago." Nathan continued, his voice thick with unshed guilt. He told me that to really make it, to secure my future, I needed powerful connections. He said Miranda and Richard were key. He said I had to impress them to make them see me as one of them. He even suggested, he said it would be better if they thought Miranda was more like my mother figure. He said you wouldn't understand, Mom, that our background would hold me back. He was practically sobbing now. He said this was the only way to get enough money for a real college fund for medical school. He said he'd manage it. A cold dread spread through me. This wasn't just Nathan's youthful insecurity. This was a calculated manipulation. My son had been a pawn. And just as that sickening realization hit me, a smooth, familiar voice cut through the tense silence. Well, what have we here? A little family drama?" I turned. Standing in the archway, a smirk playing on his lips, was Derek Blake. He looked older, a little more weathered, but his eyes held the same manipulative glint I remembered all too well. He surveyed the scene. Nathan crying me, trembling with anger and pain. Miranda and Richard looking shocked, with an air of detached amusement. But what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of his venomous attack, and the truth would soon come to light in the most unexpected and explosive way. Derek sauntered into the tense circle, his eyes like chips of ice flicking between me, Nathan, and the stunned faces of Miranda and Richard. He had always possessed an uncanny ability to appear at the most damaging moments, a vulture circling a fresh kill. His presence was a physical weight pressing down on the already suffocating atmosphere. "Nathan's son," Derek began, his voice oozing false concern as he placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder, a gesture that made my skin crawl. Nathan flinched but didn't pull away, still caught in the web of his father's influence. "Don't let her upset you. Your mother—" He paused, letting the implication hang in the air, then turned his gaze to Miranda and Richard. "Carolyn has always been a bit dramatic, prone to exaggeration." Then he delivered his preemptive strike, the lie he'd probably been polishing for years. "Don't listen to her attempts to make me the villain." The truth is, Carolyn was the reason our family fell apart in the first place. She was unfaithful, you see. While I was out trying to build a life for us, He let his voice trail off, shaking his head with an air of sorrowful regret, a masterful performance of a wronged man. A gasp rippled through the onlookers who hadn't yet dispersed. My mind reeled. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall of him. He was trying to paint me as the architect of my own misery to discredit me before I could expose him. But something inside me snapped. The years of swallowing his poison, of allowing his shadow to dictate my choices, were over. The pain in my chest, the humiliation of moments ago coalesced into a cold, hard resolve. This ended now. Unfaithful. I repeated, my voice low and dangerous, cutting through his feigned sorrow. Unfaithful to whom, Derek? To the man who abandoned me the second he found out I was pregnant with his child. To the man who didn't send so much as a birthday card for the first 15 years of Nathan's life. Derek's smirk faltered. "Now, Carolyn, that's not how it was." "Oh, isn't it?" I advanced on him, the years of repressed anger fueling every step. "Let me tell you, and everyone here, exactly how it was." My eyes swept over Miranda and Richard, then back to Derek. "This man, Derek Blake, walked out on me when I was 18 and pregnant. He offered no support, no acknowledgement, nothing. For years, I raised Nathan alone, working every menial job I could find, just to keep a roof over our heads and food in our bellies." My gaze softened as I looked at Nathan, whose face was a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Yes, Nathan, years later, long after your father had proven himself to be nothing more than a ghost in our lives, I did find a moment of comfort with someone else, a kind, decent man who treated me with respect. I deserved that much, didn't I? I didn't wait for an answer. But then Derek reappeared. Not when you were a baby, Nathan, not when I was struggling through sleepless nights and endless worry. No, he reappeared when you were a teenager, when you started showing real promise, when he perhaps saw an opportunity. I turned back to Derek, my voice laced with the bitterness of that long-ago betrayal. And do you know what he did? He found out about my friend, and he threatened me. He told me if I didn't end that relationship immediately, he would tell Nathan I was an unfit mother, that he would poison my son against me, drag me through a custody battle I couldn't afford emotionally or financially. He blackmailed me into giving up my one chance at happiness, all to maintain his facade to keep his control. So I did it. I chose my son, as I always have. I chose to protect Nathan from you. The silence in the room was absolute. Miranda's hand was at her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Richard's expression was grim, his lawyerly mind clearly processing the implications of Derek's character. Now it was Nathan's turn, the dam of his own complicity finally breaking. Tears streamed down his face, no longer just tears of shame, but of a deeper, more profound realization. "Mom, he told me you drove him away." Nathan choked out, looking at Derek with dawning disgust. "He said you were difficult, that you didn't appreciate him. When he came back, he said he wanted to make things right, to give me the chances you never could." He turned to Miranda and Richard, his voice trembling. He coached me. He told me what to say to you, how to act. He said you were my ticket to a better life, that you had the money and influence. The college fund. He said he would manage it, invest it for me, make sure it grew. He said it was too complicated for Mom to understand, that she'd probably just waste it on bills. The raw ugliness of the scheme hung in the air. Derek wasn't just an absent father. He was a predator grooming his own son to exploit the generosity of others, all while systematically undermining the mother who had sacrificed everything. My internal monologue was a whirlwind, the searing pain of Nathan's initial betrayal, the cold fury at Derek's manipulations, but overlaying it all, a fierce protective love for my son, who was as much a victim of Derek's machinations as I had been. He'd been foolish, yes, ashamed of our poverty, yes, but he'd also been systematically poisoned by a master manipulator. The realization hit me like a freight train loaded with years of pain. Derek hadn't just reappeared to be a father. He'd reappeared with a plan, a long con, and Nathan and Miranda were his marks. My decision was instantaneous, solidified by years of protecting Nathan. "Derek," I said, my voice resonating with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "You have preyed on my son's ambition and insecurities. You have tried to rewrite our history to suit your narrative. You have lied and you have schemed. But it stops now. You will not have him. You will not touch his future." The air crackled with anticipation. Derek looked like a cornered animal, his charms stripped away, revealing the grasping, desperate man beneath. The confrontation was far from over. It was about to reach its peak. The truth bomb had detonated, and the fallout was just beginning. The reception hall had transformed into a courtroom of sorts, the remaining guests silent, unwilling witnesses to a family imploding and perhaps reforming. Derek, stripped of his suave facade, looked flustered, his eyes darting around for an escape route that didn't exist. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I, Carolyn Blake, the family friend, the overly dramatic mother, stood at the center, not with a script fed by a manipulator, but with the unassailable power of 19 years of truth. "Let's be very clear, Derek," I continued, my voice ringing with conviction, each word a hammer blow against his crumbling defenses. "You accuse me of infidelity. You disappeared from my life, from Nathan's life, for 15 years. 15 years of birthdays you missed, school, plays, you never saw fevers I nursed alone. What marital vows was I supposedly breaking when my husband was a phantom, a figment of a past I was forced to bury just to survive?" Derek opened his mouth, a sputtering denial forming on his lips. "That's a lie. I tried to reach out." "She tried to reach out?" I cut him off, a scornful laugh escaping me. With what Derek's silence neglect, the occasional rumor I'd hear of you living your life unburdened by responsibility. The only time you reached out was when Nathan became a valuable asset in your eyes, a potential lottery ticket. Nathan, no longer cowering, stepped slightly forward, aligning himself with me. His face was streaked with tears, but his eyes held a new clarity, a painful understanding. "He's right, Mom. You're right," he stammered, then addressed Miranda and Richard directly, his voice shaking but firm. "Mr. Blake, my father, he told me specific things to say to you. He helped me craft emails," he said, to emphasize my desire to escape my limiting background. He told me to downplay my mom's role, to make it seem like I was achieving everything despite her, not because of her. He even suggested I hint that Mom might be a financial drain if she were too involved with any funds you provided. A collective gasp went through the remaining guests. Miranda looked physically ill, her hand flying to her chest. Richard's jaw tightened, his gaze on Derek, now one of undisguised contempt. "So, Mr. Blake," Richard said, his lawyerly tone sharp and incisive, "this college fund you were so keen to manage for Nathan, what were your proposed fees? What was your personal stake in my wife's charitable contributions to your son?" Derek blanched. I was just trying to help Nathan, to ensure his future. He's my son." "Your son," I interjected, my voice dripping with irony. "A son you only acknowledged when he could be of use to you. A son you systematically tried to turn against the one person who has loved and supported him unconditionally his entire life." This was it, the cascade of truth. The carefully constructed lies were unraveling one by one. The shock on people's faces was palpable. James, Nathan's friend, looked from Nathan to me with a mixture of horror and dawning respect. Other parents whispered amongst themselves, their expressions ranging from outrage on my behalf to pity for Nathan. Miranda stepped forward, her composure regained, but her eyes blazing with indignation. "Derek," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm, "I offered to sponsor Nathan because I saw a brilliant, deserving young man with a dream. My charity is built on trust and a genuine desire to uplift. To think that you would try to exploit that to manipulate your own son and my goodwill for personal gain, it's despicable." Richard put a protective arm around her. "Mr. Blake," he said, his voice cold as steel, "I believe your presence here is no longer welcome. In fact, I'd advise you to leave immediately before this situation escalates further, perhaps into areas you'd find even more uncomfortable." The unspoken threat of legal repercussions hung heavy in the air. Derek looked around, his face a mottled red. He tried to rally to bluster. "You can't believe her. She's twisting everything Nathan tell them." But Nathan shook his head, tears still flowing. "No, Dad, she's not. For the first time. I'm seeing everything clearly. You used me. You lied to me about Mom. You tried to make me ashamed of her, and she's the best person I know." He then turned to me, his voice choked with emotion. "Mom, I am so sorry. I was a selfish, ungrateful fool. I let shame. I don't know how you can ever forgive me. You are my mother, my only mother, the best mother anyone could ask for." He took a hesitant step towards me, and then with a sob, he threw his arms around me, burying his face in my shoulder. My arms went around him instinctively, holding my son, my boy, who had stumbled badly, but was now finding his way back. My moment of triumph wasn't about vengeance against Derek. It was this: the return of my son, the affirmation of truth. Derek stood there, utterly defeated, the target of every disdainful gaze in the room. His attempts at manipulation had backfired spectacularly. He was exposed, humiliated. Karma didn't just come for him, it brought an entire army of his own making. "I think you heard my husband, Mr. Blake," Miranda said quietly. "Leave." With a final venomous glare in my direction, Derek turned and practically fled the hall, the whispers and shocked stares following him like a tangible force. Justice wasn't just served, it was a 5-course meal of his own bitter cooking. As the doors swung shut behind him, a wave of exhaustion washed over me, but it was an exhaustion mingled with profound relief. Nathan was still clinging to me, his apologies muffled against my dress. Miranda approached us, her eyes soft with a mixture of sympathy and newfound respect for me. "Carolyn," she said, her voice gentle, "I am so profoundly sorry, for my part in this, however unwitting, for not seeing. I was so focused on Nathan's academic potential, I missed the personal complexities. You are an extraordinary woman, and Nathan is incredibly lucky to have you." Richard nodded in agreement. "Mrs. Blake, your strength is remarkable. Nathan," he said, looking at my son, "you've made a serious error in judgment, but acknowledging it is the first step. The path ahead will require you to earn back trust, especially your mother's." Nathan pulled back, his face earnest and tear-stained. "I will, Mom. I promise. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." The applause that had celebrated Nathan's valedictorian status earlier felt hollow compared to the silent, profound respect that now filled the space around us. The truth hadn't just set me free, it had begun to rebuild us all. The grand reception hall, once buzzing with celebratory chatter, slowly emptied. A few lingering guests approached me, their faces etched with sympathy, offering quiet words of support. "You're an amazing mother," one woman whispered, pressing my hand. "Don't let anyone ever make you feel otherwise." Each small kindness was a balm to my raw emotions. Miranda, with a tactful grace, suggested we find a more private space. She led me, Nathan still clutching my hand like a lifeline, and Richard to a small, quiet lounge off the main hall. The adrenaline that had fueled my confrontation with Derek began to ebb, leaving behind a profound weariness, but also a strange sense of lightness. The weight of years of unspoken truths, of hidden sacrifices, had finally been lifted. Nathan sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Sobs racked his body. I can't believe I did that to you, Mom. I was so stupid, so cruel. How could I say those things? How could I believe him? I sat beside him, stroking his hair, my anger towards him diluted by an overwhelming wave of maternal love and pity for the boy who had been so easily manipulated. Nathan, I said softly, Derek is a master manipulator. He preyed on your ambitions, your insecurities about our life. You made a mistake, a terrible one, but you're not him. You saw the truth in the end. Miranda poured glasses of water for us, her earlier shock replaced by a thoughtful solemnity. Carolyn, I want to reiterate how sorry I am. And Nathan, she continued, her voice kind but firm, what your father orchestrated was abhorrent. However, my belief in your potential as a doctor, in your inherent intelligence and capability, remains. My offer to support your education still stands, perhaps now with a clearer understanding of the kind of support you truly need. Richard nodded. Derek Blake won't be bothering any of us again. I'll make sure of that. If he makes any attempt to contact you, Nathan, or you, Carolyn, you let me know immediately. Sometimes a well-worded letter from a lawyer can be a very effective deterrent. His words were a quiet promise of protection. Nathan looked up, his eyes red-rimmed, but filled with a desperate hope. You still want to help me after what I did? We are helping the young man who wants to be a doctor, Nathan, Miranda said gently. The young man who I believe has learned a very hard lesson today about integrity, loyalty, and the true meaning of support. Later that evening, after the last of the guests had departed and the emotional storm had somewhat subsided, Nathan showed me a string of increasingly desperate than vitriolic text messages from Derek. They ranged from pleading, Nathan, you have to believe me, she's brainwashed you, to outright threats. You'll regret this, you'll come crawling back. Together, Nathan and I blocked Derek's number. It was a small act, but symbolic. A digital severing of a toxic tie. My boundary was clear. Derek was out of our lives for good. The drive home in the clunker was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence starkly different from the tense, unspoken anxieties that had filled our car rides recently. Nathan finally broke the silence as we pulled up to our small apartment building. Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion, that drawing, the one of the house. I meant it when I drew it. And I still mean it, more than ever. I was so focused on the big house that I forgot that you already made our little apartment a home, the best home. Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time they were tears of healing. I know, baby. I always knew. In the days that followed, a new dynamic settled between us. Nathan was quieter, more thoughtful. He helped around the apartment without being asked, his eyes constantly seeking mine, filled with a desire for forgiveness and a renewed appreciation. He really talked for the first time in years about his fears, his shame, his confusion over Derek's influence, and his profound regret. I listened, offering comfort but also honesty about the pain he had caused. It was a slow, painful process, but the foundations of our bond, though cracked, were being carefully mended with the strong mortar of truth and unconditional love. Miranda called a few days later, not just to check on Nathan, but to talk to me. She expressed her admiration for my resilience and asked if I'd ever considered working outside of my physically demanding jobs. She mentioned her charity, the one that supported underprivileged youth, and spoke of needing someone with real-world understanding and compassion to help coordinate programs to be a liaison for families, much like ours had been. It was a tentative offer, a seed planted. The immediate aftermath was one of raw emotion, difficult conversations, and the slow, arduous process of rebuilding. But through it all, there was a sense of profound relief. The secrets were out. The manipulator was gone. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly seen, not just as Nathan's long-suffering mother, but as Carolyn Blake, a woman of strength and integrity. The victory wasn't just in Derek's public humiliation, but in the reclamation of my son, and in the quiet, dawning respect I saw in the eyes of those who now knew my story. Justice was being served not just in a single climactic moment, but in the slow, steady rebuilding of lives based on honesty and genuine care. 3 months. It seems like such a short span of time, yet in those 3 months, the landscape of my life and Nathan's had undergone a seismic shift. The raw, jagged edges of that graduation day had begun to smooth, not forgotten but integrated into the fabric of our story, as a testament to truth's painful but ultimately cleansing power. I found myself standing in a newly renovated community center, the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings filling the air. Miranda's charity had funded this project, a safe space for local kids to study, create, and dream, and I, Carolyn Blake, was no longer just scrubbing other people's floors or serving coffee. I was the new community outreach coordinator for the Hayes Foundation. Miranda had been serious. She saw in me not just a struggling single mother, but someone with empathy, resilience, and a deep understanding of the challenges faced by the families her charity aimed to serve. The work was fulfilling, using my mind and heart in ways my previous jobs never could. The pay was better, the hours more regular. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the chronic ache in my back was starting to subside, and the lines of exhaustion around my eyes were softening, replaced by a quiet confidence. Nathan was by my side, not as a recipient of charity, but as a volunteer for the day, helping set up for the opening event. He was just weeks away from starting his pre-med program at a reputable university, his path fully funded by Miranda's sponsorship, now managed with transparent oversight by Richard. The shadow of Derek's influence had completely lifted. Nathan had thrown himself into his studies with renewed vigor, but also with a newfound humility and a profound appreciation for the sacrifices that had paved his way. His shame had been replaced by a quiet determination to be worthy of the chances he'd been given, and more importantly, worthy of the mother he had almost lost through his folly. Derek, as Richard had predicted, had vanished. We heard nothing from him. Rumor had it through a distant acquaintance that he'd tried to insinuate himself into another wealthy family's orbit in a different city, but his reputation somehow had preceded him. His scheme had failed, and he was reportedly struggling, his manipulative charm no longer opening doors. Karma, indeed, had a long memory and a thoroughness that was deeply satisfying. What goes around doesn't just come around, it multiplies, and for Derek, it had multiplied into a barren landscape of his own making. The dynamic between Nathan and me was transformed. The guilt and remorse were still there in his eyes sometimes, but they were now interwoven with a deep, abiding love and respect that was openly expressed. He called me every day, shared his anxieties and excitements about college, and always ended his calls with, "I love you, Mom." He didn't just say the words, he lived them in his attentiveness, his consideration, his eagerness to share his life with me. Miranda and Richard had become more than just benefactors. They were friends, mentors. Miranda and I often had coffee discussing charity initiatives, but also sharing laughter and life stories. Richard, ever the pragmatist, offered Nathan sound advice on navigating the academic world and beyond. They had become an unexpected but deeply cherished part of our extended family. Tonight was the official opening of the community center. Miranda insisted I say a few words, as I had been instrumental in getting local families involved. As I stood at the small podium looking out at the hopeful faces in the crowd, my own heart swelled. But the true highlight of the evening came when Nathan was unexpectedly invited to speak by Miranda. He walked to the podium, no longer the arrogant boy trying to impress, but a young man on the cusp of his future, his eyes finding mine in the audience. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice clear and steady. "I'm Nathan Blake, and I'm incredibly proud to be here tonight. This center represents so much hope and opportunity, and speaking of opportunity and the people who make it possible..." He paused, and his gaze full of love and a humility that brought tears to my eyes locked onto me. I wouldn't be standing here today. I wouldn't be heading to college to pursue my dream of becoming a doctor if it weren't for one person. The person who taught me everything about strength, resilience, and unconditional love. The woman who sacrificed everything for me, who worked tirelessly day in and day out, who never gave up on me even when I faltered, even when I was foolish enough not to see the incredible gift I had in her. Everyone, I want you to know, the most important woman in my life. My hero, my mother, Carolyn Blake. A warm wave of applause filled the room. I was crying openly, unashamedly. Tears of pride, of love, of a profound, soul-deep gratitude. He stepped down and came straight to me, enveloping me in a hug. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "Thank you for everything, for forgiving me." "Oh, Nathan," I whispered back, clinging to him. "I love you more than words can say." The drawing of the big house was still tucked safely in my wallet. Maybe one day he would buy me that house. But in that moment, surrounded by love, respect, and the promise of a brighter future, I knew I was already living in the grandest mansion of all, a home built on truth, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. The journey had been excruciating, but the destination, this newfound peace and mutual adoration, was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. In the end, the truth didn't just set me free, it rebuilt me and my family stronger than ever. That night, watching Nathan speak with such heartfelt sincerity, I realized the moral of our story wasn't just about the enduring power of a mother's love, though that was a huge part of it. It was about the courage to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. It was about the corrosive nature of shame and the liberating power of authenticity. It showed that mistakes, even painful ones, can be profound teachers, and that forgiveness, when earned and freely given, can heal the deepest wounds. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or social standing, but in the love that anchors us, the integrity that guides us, and the strength of the relationships we nurture. Have you ever felt unseen or undervalued by those you love most? What does true family, true support really mean to you? Sometimes the people who are supposed to lift us high are the ones who try to keep us small, and sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those we least expect. But even in the darkest moments, there is always a path back to the light, usually paved with uncomfortable truths and brave conversations. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever fought for recognition or navigated the treacherous waters of family dynamics, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone. Comment below with your own experiences of overcoming family challenges, celebrating a mother's incredible strength, or finding your voice after being silenced. Let's support each other. Remember your inherent worth. Never let anyone else define you or diminish the sacrifices you've made out of love. The truth, however buried, always has a way of surfacing, and building a life based on love, honesty, and integrity is the most profound achievement of all. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to be cherished for who you are. Stay tuned for more stories of resilience, justice, and the incredible power of the human spirit to overcome, heal, and thrive. Your story matters.